guys back. Welcome to my garage mahal. As you can see, I have all kinds of space now.
How many robots in there? So many activities!
Tons of room to work on my projects, and as you can see, it looks like I basically shoved a grenade in the middle of my quad and pulled a pin, and I assure you guys, it was awesome, and I wish you could have seen it. But in reality, what we're actually getting to today is I'm going to show you guys what I did in preparation for Works Round 7. I'm going to be racing in Blythe. So I finally signed up, just said screw it, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be racing in Blythe, California on October 17th, 18th, I think it's that weekend. That should be Works Round 7. So what I've had to do in preparation, because I didn't have anything on there yet, was I had to add my kill switch. So tethered kill switch is on. I had to wire a bunch of things up because I wanted to keep my headlights still. So I went and got a hot start button as well to clean up the bars, and then I've got a light switch kind of hidden in here. I'll show you guys here in a second how I wired everything up. But I'm still waiting on Nerf bars because I think I still need those to be legal to race. But Wrath Racing said they're working on them. They'll get them out to me as fast as possible. So hopefully they get here within the next week, and then I can toss them on and we're good to go. But today I'm just going to show you guys how I wired things up. I also have to put a new clutch in this thing. So I've got a Hinson clutch. I've had the plates soaking in oil already for like an entire day. So that's got to go in today, and then I can take this thing out, rip, and break in that clutch a little bit. So let's get to it. I'll show you guys what I did and how I wired everything up. All right, so first things first, I had to get rid of that massive switch module you guys saw up here, the whole housing and everything. I had to get rid of that because it kept rotating on me and stuff. Just went and got basically an engine stop-start button. So if you guys want to wire one of these up so you still have your electric start, just go find one of these engine stop buttons, and as long as it has continual continuity, it should work. So the other thing was trying to run all these wires down here. Separating everything so that I had the right wires running to what. I'll show you guys here in a second just what I'm talking about. But the kill switch itself from Pro Design was actually relatively simple. It was really easy to do. The directions they send with you are kind of convoluted and hard to follow, but I basically just wired it into the same stop run switch that was on the switch housing. So I'll show you guys how I got all that hooked up, because the wires are kind of confusing, but we got it figured out. So let me show you guys. Key in, power on, make sure the gas is on. Forget that sometimes. All right, there we go, and it's running. Now, as for the kill switch itself, works out pretty well. When you get the kill switch, now this is the Pro Design. I don't know if it's always the same across all the tethered kill switches, but I think Pro Armor's pretty close. So when you guys pull apart the harness, okay, you can see I've got the two wires running from the kill switch right here. All right, you've got a long one and a short one. So the long one is supposed to go all the way down. You're supposed to pull off your stator cover and go into your stator and find the ignition signal wire running to your spark plug, basically. And the other one's just a chassis ground. Well, I thought, if you look on this right here, that's basically all this is. So you've got your two wires running out of here. One runs to your ignition, the other one's a ground. Well, I thought, why don't I try that? So I basically pulled apart this housing, and you can see I removed a bunch of the switches right now, but the start button, followed those wires, followed the wires from the kill switch, and when I pulled apart the wiring underneath the hood here, lo and behold, here's the green wire, and then the black with white stripe is basically your ground wire. So I hooked up the long wire to the green and the short wire to the black with white stripe. Now I cut the long one because I didn't want so much hanging out underneath the hood, but it worked beautifully. Think of it more like, not so much ground and power, think of it more like power in, power out. So now, as for the lights, I want you guys to see this. Turn the ignition on, and right down here, I've hidden a little LED switch. And it works the little LED headlight I basically just picked it up from Harbor Freight, guys. It's nothing special, but it's bright enough for me to see whenever it gets dark out. So, but you can see, switch lights up and everything. Now, how this broke down was a little bit more complicated. Okay, so the white wire here, which you'll see coming out of your little switch housing, is basically your signal wire, all right? Then the black wire coming into your housing that goes to the light switches. Actually, let me see if I can show you guys here. Okay. All right, so the black wire here runs straight into, this is your light on off. This is just your low beam, high beam switch. So this black one here was actually power in. Confusing, I know, I was looking for a red wire. But that was actually power in. And what this one here is, the brown wire, is your tail lights. So I haven't hooked those up because I don't even have a tail light on here right now. But when I do, that'll be the brown wire. Then this blue wire is actually the signal out. Actually, sorry, white wire. So this white wire here was the signal out, and that goes to the headlight. So basically running low beam, but that's the only light I have on here. This isn't high beam, low beam, so I just needed the one to go here. So on the switch itself, the red wire runs to the black from the quad. The black I hooked up to a chassis ground, so that's grounded out here. And then the blue wire is my signal wire, and that's running to this white one. So, bam. LED switch so you can see that. Turns the lights on, turns the lights off. That's it. Pretty simple. That again is another switch. Oh my God, I can't stop sweating, it's hot in here. That switch I also got at Tractor Supply. So you can find them for dirt cheap, and they hook up to just about anything. You just have to figure out what's your positive, your ground, and your signal wire. So again, in a little while, I'm gonna go back in, and I've got this brown wire sitting here so that I can go ahead and hook up my taillights when I get a new taillight and put it on. That's mostly for riding trails, or if I go out with some friends to the dunes or something, it starts getting dark out. It's good to have lights on because people can't see you out there, especially in the dust. So, but as for all the wiring, that's it. That's everything. As you can see, it really cleans up the bars, and it gets rid of this entire switch housing. Hey, one more thing I forgot to point out to you guys before we get into this tidying up and everything. If you guys see this little switch right here, all right, it's got a little push button tab on it. Basically, all that was the clutch position sensor. So whenever you pull the clutch in, it lets the quad know that you can start it because the clutch is disengaged. And that little button pops out, letting the quad know, all right, you can go ahead and start it because he's got the clutch in. Well, when you put new levers on, like ASV or something like that, they don't come with the little spot where you can bolt that sensor back up. So I just had the wires hanging there for a little bit, and I basically couldn't start it unless I was in neutral. So what I did was I took the switch and I hooked it back up to the wires, and I just tied it off in here so everything hangs out here and leaves this disengaged so that I can start this thing in gear. And where that will be useful is if I'm ever in a situation where I want to start in gear, like let's say I'm on a hill, I want to start in gear or anything like that, the brakes aren't working that well, or like a dead start race where basically you have to run to the quad, jump on it, start and go. I'd like to be able to start in gear. So I hooked that back up, and I should be able to do that now. So the other thing, just to tidy up all this wiring, I used a ton of heat shrink. I mean, even on like the individual connections, so every time I tied wire together and whatever soldering, I would put a sheath over that, each individual one, and then I would wrap it again just so that it's double wrapped, just to keep it that much more weatherproof. And then also these big sleeves come in handy when you've got a ton of bundles or a bundle of wiring you want to put together. Just use that heat shrink, slide it over everything, shrink it down, it tidies up pretty well. So here I'm gonna have to tidy this up a bit, but as you can see, everything's gonna sit nice under the hood pretty well. So let's get to it, no more dulling. So in case you guys couldn't see it very well, I'm gonna turn the bars up, all right? Turn the ignition on, and if you can see, right down in here, there's the light switch. Now, nothing special about mounting it. It's just a pain in the butt to get that bolt all the way down here on the same part of the frame that holds the steering stem. Basically, I just took a small rectangle piece of metal, again from Tractor Supply, and I used a step bit to hone out the hole big enough for this switch, because it's just a threaded switch. Basically, on the backside is a nut that tightens up against the plate on the backside. And then I used the washers to kind of outline the switch so it's easier to see. It seems to work better with that washer on there anyway. Everything tightens up better. And then that bolt is a pain in the butt. You have to fish from underneath with an Allen wrench. I just used an Allen head bolt. Fished from underneath with my hand in front of the radiator to hold the bolt there while I tighten the nut down on top. It's kind of a pain, but it works, and it's a nice clean install, as you can see. Switch on, light, and it's hidden way down here. Everything's out of the way, nice and clean, and you can see the switch. Not bad. So let's get to that clutch. In case you guys wanted to know, I went with the Hinson clutch and spring kit. So basically, I just went with springs, your steels, and your fiber plates. And then I also got, of course, the clutch cover, because let's be honest, that looks awesome. One thing I did see, people who were actually complaining about Hinson clutches burning out on them. I was kind of curious, like, why would that happen? You know, I didn't have mine burn out on me, but then it dawned on me. Hinson literally says, you know, from their instruction manual, I mean, it says right in there, black and white, make sure you soak your fibers or your clutches in oil, and they recommend petroleum-based 10W40. I mean, you can find that stuff anywhere. I love Honda lubes, so I always go and get the GN4 stuff, but these have been sitting in here for at least a day. So make sure you guys are soaking your clutches before you put them in. Otherwise, you're going to have some dry clutches, and they're just going to be rubbing dry against some plates. They don't have enough time to soak up the oil that's in the engine when you're running it. So make sure you guys soak your plate or your clutches first before you put them into the clutch basket. So remember that little tip. Also, why did I go with just the clutch and springs and not the whole basket and everything, the billet-proof, all that? Well, because I don't really need the basket right now. I'm not racing that heavily that I'm going to need it, so I just went with a clutch and spring kit for, you know, a couple $100. You get all your steels, your fibers, and your springs. Put them right back in. They grab very well. I put them in my Supermoto. I don't know if you guys have seen that video. It worked great in that Supermoto. I mean, that thing grabbed like crazy, so I love it. I'm going to keep using this stuff, and don't forget, keep the seal from your old clutch cover. Just in case you guys were wondering, don't try to tear that thing out, because they don't send one with this. And I'm glad I hung on to that, because that would have been trouble. I would have had to wait on another part. So make sure you guys do that. But let's get this thing in. So we're down to the last little bit here. Got all the bolts and springs in. One thing to note, guys, do not over tighten these bolts. Okay, they're only supposed to go to like 108 inch-pounds, I think is what the manual, your Honda manual, will tell you, which is about the same as 9 foot-pounds. Do not over tighten these. I can't stress that enough, because they're just aluminum hubs and everything. The pressure plates are aluminum, your clutch basket's aluminum, everything's aluminum to keep everything light. But with that being said, when you zip a bolt in too hard, you're going to strip threads, and then you're basically screwed. You're going to be replacing the whole thing anyway. So I went and picked up a small little torque wrench. It starts at 5 foot-pounds. I'm gonna go to 9. I'm just gonna go around. I'm gonna start torquing. So remember that, guys. That's all she wrote, folks. I got this thing all buttoned up now. Everything's tightened up. One thing I am gonna do is keep my stock clutch. I've got all the plates and everything in here and the springs just because things break. So it's always nice to have a spare just in case something happens, especially another cover, because who knows what you could do with this. You could actually strip this, repowder coat it, put it back on, get your name etched in it, who knows. Just a cool thing to keep around. So remember that. Another thing. If you guys are looking for oils and things like that, trying to find the best synthetics and things, I just recommend putting GN4 in, especially if you have a Honda. This stuff's good. It's recommended. The manufacturer made it for a reason. It holds up really well. The oil I pulled out actually was in really good shape. I didn't even need to change it, but since I was in there, I had to drain it anyway, so might as well. But it had about 5 rides on it, 6 rides on it, maybe 3 total hours. And it looked great. I mean, there wasn't even any shavings in there. There's a little bit in the clutch there. There's a little bit of clutch fiber, but I mean, that's gonna happen. So I'll keep the stock clutch around. I'm done working on this thing. I'm ready to go ride it. So I'm gonna go start breaking in this clutch. But thanks for tuning in, guys. Remember, keep the rubber side down, and I'll catch you next time.
I suppose we better take it easy on this thing, you know, since it's a brand new clutch and all.